Welcome to Theme Deck Tuesday. This is the weekly series where I bring you a review of a theme deck in the Pokemon trading card game. Of course, it might not be a good theme deck or a recent one, and this week we are taking a look at another old theme deck. This time it is one featuring Eevee and Sylveon. So let's get into the deck profile as well as the matches. As always, there are timestamps down below if you want to check those out, but we have an interesting one for you today anyways. So having a brief look through the deck here, starting off with the Sylveon, which is the main star Pokemon. It does have the Curly Ribbon attack for 1 Fairy Energy, just deals a small 30 damage, but you do have a very nice effect here for theme deck format, as you get to move an energy from the active Pokemon to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This can be nice if they're trying to build up a Pokemon in the front. You can keep putting the energy onto something that they don't want the energy to be on, which is very good, as well as dealing that little bit of damage just to chip away and make the following attacks that a little bit more effective. Of course, your opponent can easily play around this because they can just attach energy onto their bench, and then this has no effect other than 30 damage, but hopefully your opponent doesn't realise that and you can at least use it a couple of times. You do also have the Echoed Voice attack that you can work towards, which deals 50 damage, not a huge amount, but on the following turn it deals 100 damage, and then every turn after that it's going to deal 100 damage if you keep using it. So not terrible, but combined with the fact that Eevee does have energy evolution in this deck, as you can see here, this ability allows you to evolve into the same type of Pokemon that evolves from Eevee based on the type of energy that you attach to Eevee. And you can use this ability on the turn that you play Eevee down, you can use it on the first turn of the game, and at any point that you want to use this ability you can to instantly get out the evolution. And of course, as we just saw, we have the Sylveon and we also have the Leafeon that we'll take a look at in a moment. But as a whole, this deck is definitely not very consistent, so the fact that energy evolution is here in the deck, then that really makes it a standout deck in my opinion, because it's a way of basically cheating the game, as you can get around the evolution rules. You can evolve a lot faster, get your Sylveon or Leafeon up as quickly as possible. So take a look at the Leafeon then. It does have an attack for 1 energy once again for 30, but instead of moving energy around this time, we're putting the defending Pokemon to sleep. This could be useful if they stay asleep and you're able to stall out for a bit, work towards that magical leaf attack for 50, and then you also get to deal additional damage, which could be pretty useful overall. And you could also heal, which again, if you're actually able to survive some hits, since you only have 90 HP, then that's going to be good. But yeah, having that low HP is really going to hurt you when it's so easy to deal 90 damage with modern theme decks. We do also have a lot of other Pokemon. None of them are particularly good, so I'm leave you to go through them yourself if you're interested in the deck. But the one other Pokemon that I will point out is the Excelgor here, as it does have Raid, which deals 60 damage when you evolve into the Excelgor, but any other time it is just dealing 20. The other good attack on it though is After Image Strike, as you deal 40 for 2 energy, and then on your opponent's turn when they try to attack, they have to flip a coin in order to deal any damage into the Excelgor. And that's just like the agility or the tact, any kind of attack like that we've seen in other theme decks. Very good for stalling out and getting damage in as much as possible, but as a whole, this deck is not going to be dealing a huge amount of damage when you're stuck dealing 30, 40, 50 damage at a time. It's just not going to keep up with the other modern theme decks that we've seen so many times before in the past. Coupled with the fact, of course, that we have a very poor trainer lineup. We only have 1 supporter in the whole deck. Now, we do have 2 copies of it, but we do only have 1 supporter card, and that is Battle Reporter. It could actually be good, as typically you want to build up a large hand size, so if your opponent does have a large hand, you can typically draw a lot with Battle Reporter, the way that the meta is at the moment. But overall, the fact that we only have 2 of these is pretty terrible. We do also have 2 Professor's Letter, which is nice at getting us energy, to be fair. And we do also have 2 Roller Skates, which you do have to get a heads on, but if you do get a heads, you get to draw 3 cards. So, could be useful, but for the most part, with my luck anyway, you're probably going to get Tails. Everything else is pretty standard. We see Potion a lot in other theme decks, same with Energy Cert. and energy switches. And the only other thing to note here is the fact that we get multiple copies of Maintenance, which is just a terrible card overall, and especially in theme deck format, because you actually put 2 cards from your hand into your deck, shuffle your deck, and then you get to draw a card. So you're actually making your hand and your deck worse with this card, and I certainly wouldn't recommend playing it other than the fact for, I don't know, you want to have a bit of fun, or you just really want that one card, but you're more than likely going to get back the cards that you put into the deck in the first place. So highly recommend that you don't play that card if you draw into it, as it's going to make your deck and your hand a lot worse. Let's get into some matches here with the deck. Let me know if you've played any games with the Sylveon deck. Tried it out a bit. It's certainly not going to do well against the modern decks, but hopefully we get some games against the older ones. So we'll get into it, see what happens, and as always, I hope you enjoy. Going into our first game here, we do have the Clefairy that we can work with, since we've got the Clefable nice and early in our hand. We do get a hit on the roller skates, which is awesome, so we can draw an additional 3 cards. We can slap an energy down on that Clefairy, and I think we're going to be passing over to my opponent. I suppose we might as well put down this Bellsprout. Might as well, since we have the evolution for it. We can work towards that stage 2. No reason not to. The only downside, of course, is that we are up against the Vivid Voltage Charizard deck, so it's going to be very difficult to win this matchup just in general, never mind the fact that they're hitting for a weakness as well. Looks like my opponent has misclicked potentially there, because they definitely could have drawn 2 cards, but instead they decided to deal 0 damage to us, so definitely can't complain there. We get our Clefable down, and we're going to attach an energy onto it so that we can start dealing some damage on our side of the board. Hopefully we can deal some decent damage here. I mean, it's only going to be 30, but we are reducing damage by 30 as well. So if my opponent wants to attack us, it's once again going to deal 0 damage to us, meaning that we get another attack if we want it, although that is going to be problematic if my opponent starts hitting into us. We see a bead from them, so they're going to be getting an extra energy attached onto that Lugia, and that's going to become a threat in the next couple of turns here. Going back over to us, we do get another Pokemon, certainly not something that we can work with really here. Let's attach onto our bench. I guess we can put it into play just in case we get the evolution, or I mean we might want to use Big Yawn, put both of our actives to sleep and potentially stall, but we're probably just going to go for the 30 damage again. We don't really want to switch my opponent's Pokemon. We could bring up the Charmeleon, I suppose, since it doesn't have any energy just yet, but ultimately we don't really have any good targets to bring up from my opponent's bench, so we're just going to hit them for 30 once again, reducing our damage during my opponent's turn here. So they might just draw 2 cards once again, or they might choose to attack us. If they are attacking us, they're only dealing 30 on their end. The little bit of an issue here is the fact that the Sudowoodo does have 100 HP, so it's actually going to take us 4 attacks in order to get a knockout, and of course we only have 90 HP on our end, so if we do get an attack in here for 30 once again, my opponent can follow up with a knockout on their turn, which certainly isn't ideal at all. I think we're going to be attaching the fairy onto our bench here, and we could go for maintenance. I don't really want to play maintenance really, it's just such a terrible card. Sure, let's play it out so that you can at least see how it works. There you go, we get 1 card and we'll lose those 2 Pokemon that we had. We have just ultimately made our deck worse and given us worse draws, but that's fine. We're going to bring up the Slugma that my opponent put into play, since it does have a big retreat cost and its attacks are pretty poor, although they can put us to sleep with it. So hopefully that doesn't happen and we can start hitting it for 30, or at least stall for a couple of turns while we try and get some other Pokemon down. Not that it's going to be all that relevant, since we are only dealing about 30 damage every turn with the majority of our Pokemon anyway. My opponent did have the switch, so our attack was completely irrelevant anyways, and of course they bring up the Lugia here, which is going to be able to knock out all of our Pokemon that we promote. The only one that it wouldn't knock out is the stage 2, the grass type, I forget its name, Weepinbell is this one. I can't mind the name, but yeah, the stage 2 that goes on there is the only thing that wouldn't get knocked out by this Lugia, but of course we don't have access to that right now, so I suppose we could put this up and deal a massive 40 damage with poison. Probably not going to be all that relevant since my opponent could just retreat or switch out of it, but we don't have a lot of options here, so we might as well at least deal some damage since we do already have the energy on the board. There's that poison coming in for a total of 50 damage on the Lugia. Now it's going back over to my opponent, and they can most likely just attach an energy onto the Lugia. It's not at any threat of getting knocked out, as they can easily sweep up the rest of our board with this Lugia on its own. And I'm sure they're probably going to be able to find a switch as well to clear that poison if they really need to. Let's just promote our Nightbat, I guess. Like I said, we don't have any valid attackers, and that's not really going to help us all that much. And we'll attach onto the bench so that we can go for a big yawn on the following turn, assuming of course that we do find some energy. Maybe if we get lucky and we get a battle reporter, that would allow us to draw a lot of cards, but I highly doubt that's going to happen. We do at least win the rock, paper, scissors, so my opponent's only getting 2 cards off of that, but of course they do have a massive hand already, at least compared to us as well. They have what looks to be around 10 cards in their hand, and it's only going to be getting bigger with the energy that is looping, as well as the prize card, of course, that they just took there. So let's promote and see if we do get an energy so we can yawn, and of course we do not get one, so we're going to have to pass over to my opponent where they can take another knockout. And honestly, I think we're just going to concede at this point because there is nothing that this deck can do in order to have a comeback and win this match. So that is going to be a big old concede from us. Really unfortunate, but you know, this is just the way that these old decks are, and you're never going to get set up all that well. Let's get into another one and show it off once again. Alright, we've got a game against another old deck at long last. Hopefully we can get a little bit more set up than the previous one and actually show off how this deck works quite nicely. So let's go with the Eevee. I think that's going to be the main star here, and it does allow me to show off that energy evolution ability here. So you can, as you see, attach an energy and you get to put an evolution straight on there, even though it was our first turn, and it's even the first turn of the game. So this ability definitely breaks the rules in that sense, but that's one of the main reasons that I really enjoy using that evolution Eevee, as it is a very powerful ability for sure. It's just a case of using a pretty good attacker is the main thing, but that's certainly not something that this deck has, because the Sylveon is honestly kind of mediocre overall. It's not the best and certainly doesn't stack up with the modern decks at all. So let's go here. We do have the retreat we could go for and start attacking with the Sylveon, which I honestly don't hate, and means that we can at least get some damage on the board. So let's go ahead, retreat, and start dealing our 30. Where do we want to put the energy though is the question, and I think we want it onto the benched Spiritomb. Why not? Spiritomb doesn't do a huge amount of damage here, as you can see. Just has that Terrify for 10, and if the defending Pokemon is a basic, then we can't attack. But Sylveon is definitely not a basic Pokemon, so I'm not worried about the Spiritomb whatsoever. Definitely don't mind the energy going there. My opponent does get a head off of the Timer Ball, so they're going to grab themselves the Lucario. Definitely a decent attacker, but you do want it in that deck for the ability, as you can search out any card if you have Garchomp in play. Of course, my opponent is going to have to find the Garchomp first in order for that to be effective. We top deck a Tornadus. Kind of want to just start attaching to our bench. I think that's going to be the best option rather than trying to build up the Echoed Voice on Sylveon. Probably not going to make it there, so let's just start attaching onto the Tornadus as a reasonable attacker overall. And we can once again attack for 30 and put that energy onto the Spiritomb. Going over to my opponent, they are in a similar situation here though, where they have a pretty small hand. They're choosing not to draw cards with the active there, the Soul Rock, and we can continue to attach energy, no problem. So that's fine by me. and we can also get a nice knockout here on the Solrock. My opponent decided to attach onto their bench, of course, that last turn, and it looks like they are going to be going in with the Lucario. They just want some damage in as quickly as possible, I'm guessing. And yep, here comes that second energy, so they can actually attack us, and they are able to get a knockout as they are dealing 70 damage, which is very reasonable for sure. Now we do have a decent resistance on the Tornadus, and we could have some decent damage as well. If you have the same amount of cards, then you're going to do additional damage, so I mean, could potentially happen, but more than likely it won't happen. Let's see what we top deck here. And yeah, is that going to work for us? Yeah, I think it is actually, because we can play this out. We can play out an energy as well, so that's actually quite nice that we were able to get that. I think we'll attach the Fairy since we want to keep the grass around for a grass attacker, and we can actually get a knockout on my opponent for 120 since we both had the same amount of cards in our hand, so we're dealing 120 damage. That's actually a pretty nice little return knockout there on my opponent, and it removes that Lucario from play as well. So if they are able to get lucky here and draw something like a Garchomp line or some way of getting there, then we should be in a good spot overall. And of course, my opponent used that Terrify attack, so we're not able to attack here with the Tornadus. As you can see, we can only retreat it, so we are going to have to build up a new attacker to work with here. We don't really have a lot of options overall, but I suppose we could start powering up the, was it the Vigoroth? Yeah, Vigoroth is the stage 1, so we'll start attaching energy here, and we can leave the Tornadus to take a couple of hits for now, I guess. This does have a 1 attack cost though for 20, isn't a huge amount of damage, but I guess it's better than nothing, and Tornadus does have a 1 retreat cost, so I don't mind this too much, and we can at least deal some damage into the Spiritomb here, rather than nothing at all. My opponent's going to be drawing a card. Let's see if they can get something useful on their end. They're in the same situation as us, where we're both going to be looking for a supporter card here, but my opponent does retreat, and they're going to go for the Ascension on the Gibble, which puts it straight up into a Gabite, so very similar, where we both have ways to get our evolutions out nice and easily, which is very cool to see. We do have a Pokemon that we can put into play, I guess we'll put that down, no real reason not to. And we can continue to attach energy. Let's put that onto the active so we can get some bigger damage in, and we'll once again just hit for 20. Not going to be super impressive, and of course my opponent will be looking to get that Garchomp in, since the Gibble and the Gabite both have the Ascension ability, or not ability, attack, where they can go ahead and get that evolution out, so they can easily search out that Garchomp, and on this following turn they can attach energy and hit us for 100 damage. Now we do have a potion. Somehow don't think that's going to be relevant, although you never know, when we could actually survive a hit with the Garchomp, so I guess we'll play out the potion just for that exact situation, and we'll attach an energy and go ahead and hit my opponent, hopefully getting a heads, but doesn't look like that's going to be the case, so we just hit them for the 70 and take 20 damage ourselves, making it very easy for my opponent to take a knockout here. And interesting that they do attach onto the bench, so they are just going to be using that first attack on the Garchomp to snipe 50 damage onto any one of our Pokemon, and they are going to be dealing it onto the Tornadus, which is definitely reasonable for them. So they're going to be giving up the Garchomp here, since we can deal 70 once again. We get another tail, so we are going to be damaging ourselves, but we do at least get to knock out this Garchomp that my opponent did just spend multiple turns in order to get into play, so I can't complain there, although we are going to be having a bit of a back and forth with my opponent for sure, as they're going to be dealing 70 on their end and knocking out our Vigoroth. Now unfortunately we don't have any energy here, so we're not guaranteed an attack with our Tornadus, which is a little unfortunate. We do have Push Down though, which could deal 20, and you may have your opponent switch, which could potentially be nice, but they'll probably just send up that Spiritomb, so let's send up a Pokemon that we don't really mind about. Of course, we don't actually top deck the energy, so it was the right call there to hold off on the Tornadus, and we'll just have to pass over to my opponent, as we have no other options available, unfortunately. Let's see if my opponent has anything else going on, but looks like they're going to be the exact same. They're just attaching energy, but at least they do have the energy to attach, unlike ourselves where we really don't have that option. Yes, we could go ahead and put up the Tornadus now in the hopes that we get an energy, and we would have the same amount of cards as our opponent, so we would be able to deal a substantial amount of damage, and there we go. Get the grass energy, and we're able to attach that, have the same amount of cards as our opponent, and deal 120 for the knockout. It is perfect. Very good there, being able to take our 4th prize card of the game, but we are still needing that extra energy here in order to move our Pokemon around and get an attack in, because they're sending up the Spiritomb once again, using that Terrify to stop our Tornadus from attacking. That's definitely going to cause us some problems, but we do have some roller skates that we can make use of. Doesn't look like that's going to help us out though, so we're going to have to rely on our Tornadus. I think just taking a couple of hits here from this Spiritomb is fine, in the hopes that we can find some energy to attach onto our bench. Even if we could just top deck a supporter, we could get into the Excelgor, and that would do us a whole load of good actually, because we could get some additional damage in with that Excelgor if we could just find it. We do get an energy, which is reasonable. We'll have a look at the Shelmet, flip a coin. Yeah, that's not going to end well, is it? We have the Weeping Bell as well, but yeah, that's a 2 energy attack, so not much use there. I guess we'll start attaching onto it though for when we inevitably attack, and we'll just retreat our Tornadus again and see what my opponent has for us. Really just trying to stall out as much as possible here, definitely protecting the Tornadus since it has done us so well in getting some multiple knockouts. My opponent gets the Nestball to grab themselves a Pokemon, a basic. Interesting that they've not gotten another Gibble, so perhaps they've prized the other Garchomp pieces that they need in order to build that up a second time. And they are just going to be coming in here with 30 damage and dealing 10 to themselves. We do get the Professor's Letter, which is a very nice pickup, as it's going to allow us to thin the deck, as well as get us some energy that we so desperately need here. We can attach that onto the Weeping Bell and pass it back over to my opponent, so we can then deal some damage on this following turn with our Weeping Bell or with our Tornadus, depending upon the situation that we have here. My opponent is going to be taking a prize card, going down to 2 on their side. We have the Tornadus that we can attack with here. We can deal enough to get a knockout. We just have to figure out how we can get the cards in our hand equal my opponent, as we both need 3. We're going to top deck 1, which puts us at 6. So we would have to be able to play that card, which is a little unfortunate. Or alternatively, we could just deal 50 damage, which the Weeping Bell does deal 50 damage. The only downside, of course, is that the Tornadus is not going to be able to hit through the Spiritomb, but we did just top deck an energy, so of course we wouldn't be able to get any damage in with our Tornadus, as we couldn't get our hand low enough. I suppose we could have hit for 60 with the Tornadus, which is all we needed. We didn't actually need the full effect, which I guess I'm kind of overcomplicating it a little bit there, as we only actually needed the 60 base that the Tornadus deals. But either way, we're in a good spot here, going down to 1 prize card remaining, and this is a very promising situation. We might actually be able to win a game with this old deck and be able to show off just how effective it can be if it's against another deck of the same power level. My opponent did get ahead there, so that Riolu is actually going to be invincible here, as it does have Detect, which is very unfortunate. And I just want to make sure it is just damage, so we could actually poison it here, which could rack up some damage for us, which would be nice. And of course we do have the Excelgor, which is very good as well. Of course not going to put it into play just yet, as we want to hold off on that. So we can attach an energy onto the Tornadus and just go for our attack and get that poison damage on there. But oh, apparently it's not going to go through. Flip a coin if I prevent all effects, and of course, my bad, all effects of attacks, including damage. So that does prevent the effect of the poison that we were trying to get in there, which is a little unfortunate, but we do have some options to work with, and we do have a little bit of time here since my opponent does have 2 prize cards to take. They're just going for another detect, which gets them ahead again, so we have to try and get in here and stall out and work up some energy on our side, just as my opponent is doing as well. We do get the grass energy, which is great. We can put that onto the Shelmet, and I think we're just going to pass over to my opponent. There's nothing else that we can do here, so we're just going to wait until they get a Tails, if they continue to use Detect, or if they promote another Pokemon to try and attack with, then we will certainly be ready for that. My opponent attaching onto their bench here, as you can see, they go for the Professor Kukui. That's going to get them some additional damage if they want to attack us. Also draws 2 cards, and there is the attack. So that's going to be dealing 30 damage. The Riolu is weak to Psychic, and it has 70. So we're going to need to find a way to deal 70 damage here. The Excelgor does a 60 damage, which isn't quite there for us. We also have the Tornadus, but unfortunately my opponent has 1 more card than we do, so that's not any good for us either. I guess we'll put down this Eevee, and we'll just hit into my opponent. Not much other options, so we'll deal the 40 plus poison, and at the very least it threatens the knockout. Of course they can just retreat here, but if they do that, then we have other attackers that we can work with, which is just fine by me. And let's see, they go for Big Malasada. That is going to be healing quite a substantial amount of damage, as well as removing that poison that was affecting the Riolu, and meaning that they are going to be that little bit further away from being knocked out, but of course does leave them with 30 HP, so we could always just hit them again, and that will be enough to finish them off. Of course, there is the retreat that I mentioned. We did know that that was going to be coming at some point. My opponent does have another Ascension from the looks of things. That's going to get them the Garchomp into play once again, and mean that they only need that 1 more energy to start dealing a lot of damage to us. Now of course my opponent still has a lot more cards than us, so it's going to make it difficult to do much of anything really. I think we could go into the Excelgor, try and get some heads on our end with the After Image Strike. That could make it difficult for my opponent, or we could just make use of the Weepinbell that we have here. Yes, of course, we are running out of time. I'm going to evolve this Leafeon since we do have another Eevee if we want the Sylveon, so I'll put that into play. And we will just hit my opponent here for the 40 plus the poison just to weaken them a little bit. They're most likely going to deal a 50 damage snipe and hit into this Tornadus in order to finish it off. Take a prize there, I'm guessing, and then hit into whatever our active is, and that's going to make it difficult for us, but we'll see what they go for. Okay, that is indeed what they go for, so we could potentially just retreat here and go for the Excelgor play. I think is going to be the best option. Now we do have a hefty retreat cost, I believe. Yep, 2 retreat costs on the Weepinbell, but we can still use the energy switch, so we should be alright here. Let's go for the Excelgor. Retreat, we do have to lose our energies, or 2 of them anyways. So we're losing quite a bit of energy, but we're going to go all in with the Excelgor and hope that we hit some heads here. Moving the energy across with the energy switch, and we finally get a supporter for this game. Battle Reporter, drawing us a whole bunch of cards. We do get that Sylveon, which is very nice. That's going to protect our Eevee there. And we can also attach some energies, because why not? And then that's pretty much all we have left. Just an After Image Strike, dealing 40 damage, as well as that poison coming in here. So the coin flip does happen on my opponent's side when they try to attack us. Of course they could retreat out, try and attack with something else if they want to. Or they could just go for the attack, hope for the best. And of course, if they are going to fail it, then we win. If they do get successful and they hit through us, then they win. And there it is, they have the escape rope. there's nothing we can do about that. We'll just send up our Sylveon, I guess. There's really nothing that we can do for it, as they can retreat the Spiritomb. They played the Cynthia there, so they can deal 200 damage with that Garchomp and get the knockout on our active. Very unfortunate, as that was an extremely close game. Definitely thought we would have won that one, as it was so close, but hey, at least we got a decent matchup against another old deck, which is definitely something that I enjoy seeing when I go back to these old decks. Let me know if you enjoyed the video, and as always, leave a like if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.